IVM.
Caring for and protecting one's family, hard work, strength. These are some positives in men that are worthy of celebration. However, we need to reframe the discussion about what makes a real man. Because I guarantee you that real men cry. Real men will know to seek help when they need it. And real men do stay home with their kids. It's not only possible to raise boys who aren't emotionally stifled and shoved into boxes. It's vital if we want a generation of men who can express their emotions in a healthy way, respect women, and help nurse society back to a halfway healthy place. Our boys are too important for us to fail. And when boys go bad, we all lose. Well, that was an excerpt from a book that's written by the guest that we're going to have on today's show. This book is called Raising Boys to Be Good Men, a parent's guide to bringing up happy sons in a world filled with toxic masculinity. I have with me on my show my first international guest. Welcome to Beyond Cliché. This is your host, Indostal. And today on International Men's Day, we're going to have a conversation with a man that truly deserves to be my guest on this show. Yes, happy International Men's Day. And we have with us in the studio, Aaron Gouveia. Hi, Aaron. How are you?
I'm great. How are you? Thanks so much. This is my first international show.
I know. So we're going to officially introduce you, Aaron, in a bit. But let me first begin with, telling you it's International Men's Day, and thank you for making this time out. So happy International Men's Day to you.
Thank you very much.
Right. So, Aaron, a little bit about him. This is going to be a very interesting episode because we're officially talking to someone who's doing a lot of work in the positive masculinity space. Let me officially introduce Aaron. Aaron Gouveia is a former award-winning journalist whose byline has appeared in Time, The Washington Post, Parents Magazine, American Baby, and The Huffington Post. He's also been featured on the Today Show, Good Morning America, People, Mashable, and the USA Today to discuss parenting and politics. He's also got a website called the Daddy Files, which he started in 2008 to promote involved fatherhood, has contributed to a host of online and print publications on the topic of fatherhood. Aaron, by the way, is in Franklin, Massachusetts with his wife, 3 sons, also has a beloved dog. And he is the author of this book that I spoke to you about, the excerpt which we narrated at the beginning of the show called Raising Boys to Be Good Men. So without any further ado, I'm going to welcome Aaron officially to the show. And Aaron, by the way, good morning to you in the US. It's about, 8:45 in the evening here in India. And, one thing that is still common despite the time zones is the toxic masculinity that exists in both places, isn't it?
Yeah, unfortunately, that's something that I think is common just about everywhere.
Yeah, absolutely. So while there may be some cultural differences, but, right from the Me Too to the gender gap, and you talk about these things in your book as well, they're prevalent pretty much everywhere. And we're going to explore that in many ways. So Aaron, your journey actually started when your son, Sam, this 5-year-old boy, he applied this red nail polish and went to school, and he was bullied and teased over there. You came back. You make this post and it goes viral on social media. And what happens there and after that is what we'd like to explore. So tell us what happened, Aaron.
Yeah, so it was just about 2 years ago, and my middle son, Sam, was 5 at the time. He had just started kindergarten. Mm-hmm. And, he had been wearing nail polish for a couple of years, actually, since he was about 3, because my mother, his grandmother, used to do nails for a living. And
okay.
Yeah, so he loved it. And, I have 3 boys, so she has 2 granddaughters, but they live pretty far away. So, she wasn't going to let that stop her from, engendering a love of bright, beautiful colors in boys.
Yeah.
Because there's no reason that shouldn't happen. So
right.
Sam had been painting his nails for a couple of years, but this was the first time that he did it when he went to kindergarten. Mm-hmm. And as any parent knows, when kids go to school, a lot of your hard work is undone because now you're getting you're getting perspectives from all kinds of kids raised by all kinds of people, and they definitely do not have the same values and morals that you have. And that's what happened. Girls and boys, when they saw Sam's nails, they started making fun of him. They started telling him that's.
And these are 5-year-old kids.
These are 5 and 6-year-olds. Yeah, this is a kindergarten class. So they're 5 and 6, and both boys and girls were telling him that he was not supposed to wear nail polish because nail polish is only for girls. That he had to take it off, that he couldn't wear it again. And we tell Sam that unless he's in physical danger, he should try to talk his problems out with kids. So that's what he did, and he didn't tell the teacher. The teacher absolutely would have stopped it had she known. But so he spent the entire day telling kids that nail polish is for everybody. And by the end of the day, when my wife picked Sam up from school, and he just lost it, he collapsed. He was so upset that he couldn't even get out what was wrong, and she had to call me at work to figure out what had gone wrong. And then we figured out it was because of his nails. And, as a parent, that just breaks your heart.
Absolutely.
Up until that point, Sam had no idea that these kind of gender stereotypes even existed. And, I thought I had more time. I thought I had more time that he could be a little innocent about that. But at 5 years old, it's already pretty embedded, in a lot of cultures.
Yeah.
And so, I came home and I was angry. And after I talked to him and I told him, he could do whatever he wanted and he could wear whatever he wanted. And he actually asked to take the nail polish off. And I said, well, is that because you don't want to wear it or because you're getting made fun of? And he said, because I'm getting made fun of. And so I convinced him, I said, well, let's leave it till the morning. And if you still want to take it off in the morning, then we can. And so that's what he did. And he went to bed. And after he went to bed, I wrote that Twitter thread pretty mad. And I hit publish, and it was right before bed. So I went to bed. And when I woke up in the morning, I thought my phone was malfunctioning. I thought there was something wrong. It was like a slot machine, and the notifications were like tidal waves. I mean, it was one of the more incredible things that they wouldn't stop coming. And before the sun had even come up, People Magazine had called, and then USA Today, and then a bunch of, and then they really started pouring in all the TV stations.
And all of this is organic.
Yeah. I didn't. I've actually. I don't think
You're
I've
not
ever
someone with millions of followers on Twitter.
No, I think I had 11,000 followers on Twitter at the time. But this was just something that people took to. And, Deborah Messing, the actress in the U.S., and Gemma Stiles, I think Harry Styles' brother, all these celebrities started picking it up, and it gained traction that way. And before I knew it, it had 80,000 likes and was being reshared. And it was just an enormous, overwhelming amount of attention. And so, most of that was good, but some of it was bad. We did end up on a neo-Nazi website.
Yeah, so I read about that. Yeah.
That was horrible. When you and your son are pictured on a literal Nazi website, that was very troubling. But I have to tell you, the majority of the coverage and the majority of people who responded to us was fantastic. And that, more than anything, that is what kept Sam wearing his nail polish, because all these men started, men and boys, all of these people started sending in pictures of themselves with nail polish. Some had been wearing it for years, and some did it because they were moved by Sam's story, but they all did it in support of Sam. So I know Twitter can get pretty ugly. When we all know that.
Yeah.
But this was a rare time when social media worked exactly how social media is supposed to work.
Right.
And I was able to show him, before he left for school, I was able to show him hundreds of pictures of people supporting him and other men who wear nail polish just like he does. And that, more than anything, certainly more than any parenting we did, that allowed him to have the confidence to go to school with his nails painted. And so he still does it from time to time. He's 7 now.
Yeah, he does. Nice.
He still paints his nails from time to time. It's a little less often, but that's how this whole thing started. Because one of the calls that I got was from a couple of publishing houses, and they asked if I wanted to write a book. And honestly, I'll be very honest with you. I told them that I think they had the wrong person. Because I was not always this, progressive. I made just about every stupid mistake that you can make as a boy and a man and then a parent. It took me an embarrassingly long time to realize that these gender stereotypes are not based in any kind of reality. They're just they're trivial and they're harmful. And it took me, in my late 20s and early 30s to really figure that out. And I'm still figuring it out.
Yeah, because they're so embedded, like you said, they're everywhere. And we're going to have a deep conversation on where all do you see gender stereotypes and how do we tackle them. We're in conversation with a man who actually didn't even encounter the term toxic masculinity until he became a father. So we're in conversation with Aaron Gouveia, and we're going to be right back after a short break.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another great week on the IVM Podcast Network. If you're not following us on social media, please do. We're IVM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Want to wish you all a happy Diwali. Hope you had a great festive season. It's been a great week in terms of the kinds of guests we've had and the kind of conversations we've had on the network this week. Do definitely check some of these things out. On This Round's on Me with Gauri Devidayal. She had a great conversation with Garima Arora, who's one of the best-known chefs in the world. It was just absolutely riveting. Do check that out. On States of Anarchy, Hamsini Hariharan spoke about chronicling India's different wars. Again, really interesting episode. Check that out. Ashton had a very interesting episode on his show, The Habit Coach. It was called I Don't Feel Like Doing Anything. It's about how to overcome malaise just generally, and I thought really, really interesting stuff. Kumi Vayana was the guest on Cyrus Says on Monday's episode last week, and she's an educator, and my God, it was such a fascinating conversation talking about the way education functions in India and some of the changes she'd like to see. Just really, really interesting stuff. Do give that a listen. On Uncle Please Sit, Anupam Manur was there with Joel and Tushar talking about the Indian economy, part one of a two-part series. Second part will be out this week. You should definitely check that out. Lastly, I want to talk to you all about the Filter Coffee podcast. Karthik Nagarajan, who hosts that show, is on a little bit of a break. He's back with a banger of an episode. It is with Himura Maya, who used to run Landmark Stores, and they talk about the culture of bookstores and quizzing and all kinds of stuff. Really interesting conversation. Do check that out. And with that, let me get you back to your show.
Hello and welcome back to Beyond Cliché. This is your host Indos Dal, and I am an author, speaker, coach, changemaker. I also have a campaign on change.org where I'm asking a leading diaper company to include the father's image on the diaper wrapper. And today is International Men's Day. I hope they pick it up and they make this change, this much wanted change. With COVID, with so many fathers at home, so many fathers changing diapers, they certainly don't have any visibility anywhere. And we're going to talk about that and a lot more with our guest on the show, our international guest, Aaron Gouveia. So Aaron, before we went on break, we were talking about your journey and with the Twitter a thread that went viral, and your discovery with gender stereotypes. So let's just talk a little bit about what are these stereotypes related to boys? So one is boys will be boys don't cry, and many others. So which are the ones that you find are really damaging to boys, and we need to change them?
Right off the bat, I think the most damaging thing right now is the idea that men are weak if they ask for help.
Yeah.
And I don't know about India, but in the United States, the statistics show that men commit suicide at much higher rates than the rest of the population.
Well, it's the same story in India as well.
It is. Okay. Yeah, I imagine it would be. But I mean, that is directly because men are supposed to be strong and silent and figure everything out by themselves and never ask for help.
Yeah.
And that is incredibly dangerous. It really is, because if you think that asking for help as a man is a weakness, I got news for you. That's the strongest thing you can do, is try to be better and stronger for your family and yourself so that you can be around.
Yeah.
So when you're talking damaging stereotypes, that has to be number one on the pile, because it's literally a matter of life and death.
Right. So the normal cliche is that it's the man that will provide help. So how can a man really ask for help? And a lot of this also comes from, when you said that men can't be really weak and vulnerable, it's because we're emotionally castrating boys at a very young age. We don't allow them to cry. And I don't know about the US, but in India, it's really name calling if a boy cries. A boy is not allowed to cry. Even at funerals, parent funerals, they're mocked upon if they cry. They're supposed to be the ones that are strong and holding on. Is it the same story back there?
Oh, sure. Absolutely. And that's a trap that I've fallen into as well. And it comes up, we had a horrific shooting in Newtown, Connecticut that, made international headlines about 8 years ago, where 26 grade school children died. And President Obama, when he addressed the nation at the time, he teared up, he cried, and he was mocked widely for that. And as men, if we can't cry and show emotion over the vicious deaths of 20 some odd school children, elementary school children, then we're in a lot of trouble, because if there's ever a time to cry, that's the time to cry.
Right.
And so that kind of mentality, you're right. It's emotional castration. It's not allowing boys to harness their full range of emotional capabilities.
So, here in India, the one emotion that they're widely allowed to express is anger. Yeah, that's a given. So Bollywood is so famous. Everyone knows Bollywood, right? And Bollywood has this stereotype called the angry young man. And, it's kind of celebrated, the notion of an angry young man and a man that does not feel pain, So these things are celebrated for some reason. And it's horrific, isn't it?
It really is. Because when you do that, when you have that stereotype, it just means that, when anger is the only emotion you can show, I really believe that has far-reaching repercussions, especially in America, where gun violence is a plague.
Yeah.
And this is why it was so hard for me to write this book, because every avenue I started going down, I felt everything was interconnected. Because when you only allow boys and men to feel anger, then that's going to be their default. They don't know. And, this goes to domestic violence. So if they get upset in a relationship and their default is anger, then that leads to domestic violence.
Yeah.
If they get upset and they have anger and they have too easy access to a gun, well, you see the school shootings and all the other shootings that happen. Those are all vastly predominantly men who are pulling the trigger.
Yeah.
And, you have what they call incel culture now in America, where it's involuntary celibacy. And that has led to just a ton of online groups. And some of these shooters in these situations, they leave manifestos and they blame women for not, being with them and wanting to sleep with them and be with them. And that is the anger that boys are taught to feel. If you can't get a girl, well, don't work on yourself, then you get angry at them and it's their fault. So you have all of these overlapping things that are just killing us and killing our boys. And that's why parents, out of anybody, parents of boys really need to step up and change this.
Absolutely. So I have a 5-year-old son, and I usually talk about this everywhere, that I have a large responsibility, because, and this is something you mentioned in the book, and that's why I so relate to you, Aaron, because you're talking about the fact that we're empowering girls. They need to wear pants, and they need to be bosses in their own companies, in their homes. But what about the men? Who's going to teach them household chores? Like in India, household chores is a very big problem. For some reason, it's a woman that's expected to be in the kitchen. She should know how to wash the dishes. I learned to make my first chapati, the roti, when I was 8 years old. And I spoke about it in a previous podcast. And these are facts. We're literally trained to take care of the house. And there is no training or inculcation of survival skills in boys. And that's how it is.
Yeah, it's very true. And even, I think they call it the second shift. There was a book written called The Second Shift, where even when you have two working parents in a heterosexual relationship, so, a man and a woman married, they each work a full-time job, yet, the woman is going to take on 90% of the household chores.
Yeah.
And she's going to have to do the emotional labor of thinking of scheduling doctor's appointments and, doing everything else. And it's a real double-edged sword, because what ends up happening, I call it a little bit of gatekeeping. So it's very unfair that women are burdened with these societal, burdens that they have to do all these extra things.
Yeah.
But at the same time, a lot of men I've talked to, and I'm in a lot of father groups, a lot of men I talk to have, when they try to step up, then they're told they're not doing it the right way, which is, i.e. her way. So, you know, that becomes a self-defeating cycle where the woman's expected to do everything, but then the father tries to step up, but he's not doing it her way. So then he gets discouraged, and then the same old patterns keep continuing. So, you know, we really need to have men just need to keep stepping up and put on their big boy pants and, you know, change.
And women
diapers.
need to allow men to do that. You know, that's another thing. Yeah. They need to be comfortable with letting. So, for example, if you see there are more mommy groups on social media than daddy groups, how many daddy groups do we really have? You know, that's food for thought.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what. In 2008, when my oldest was born, I wanted to talk to people about being a parent. And first, I went to the bookstore back when bookstores still existed, and you know, from that point, I realized there are shelves and shelves of books for expectant mothers.
What to expect when you're expecting?
Yeah. And there's about 6 books there were at the time about 6 books for dads out there. And then I went online. And I had to join, you know, Baby Center, I think was the big one that you could join. Right. But I was the only man in that birth group, and they actually had a real problem with it. They had to vote whether or not to kick me off because.
Really? You're kidding me?
No, I mean they were talking about like I was invading their space, and I said, yeah, this is for parents. It's not just moms, but. That's the expectation. You know, the expectation is that moms will take care of all this stuff, and that dads just. I don't know, sit idly by and have a beer and watch the game.
So what you're trying to say is if there is a father that also wants to get actively involved, there is a level of hesitation. People do not include him, and that becomes also a challenge. That could be one of the reasons why we don't have enough daddy groups, I'm thinking.
Yeah, and I mean, it gets especially tough if you're talking about stay-at-home dads, because there are, you know, even though the number of stay-at-home dads has doubled in the past 20 years or so, they are still they're a novelty. So what happens is, you know, at the playgrounds and the play dates and everything, you start to befriend, you know, moms start to befriend each other, but it gets a little strange for them when a dad is in the mix because they have no problem inviting another woman over with their kid. But then all of a sudden, if it's inviting a dad over, you know, it's like then we're threats, you know, and we're dangerous all of a sudden. And I've been looked at on the playground like that. I've been looked at like, you know, who's this pedophile? And it's tough. It's tough. Like I hate to say it's tough being a man because in so many ways we have every advantage in the world, but in this specific instance, it's kind of flipped.
Yeah, and this is a narrative no one talks about, you know, because we usually talk about the oppression that women go through, which is very genuine in so many ways. But Absolutely. How is toxic masculinity impacting men? For example, a father who really wants to go out and celebrate his fatherhood, maybe in a park, is looked upon with suspicion in some cases. So I had a single father as well as a stay-home dad on my show. And Aaron, when I was trying to Google to find stay-home dads in India, I couldn't find any.
Really?
I mean, it was very, very difficult because especially in India, a man is known by how much money he makes.
Yeah.
So the whole the provider notion is so huge. A man has to be the provider of the house. And if he's not, then he's no longer a man.
Yeah. And to be frank, I have been on both sides of this because when my wife and I first became parents, I was a journalist, and journalists make zero money. So my wife was a very successful bank manager who was making more than double what I was making at the time. And I had convinced myself that I was fine with it. And, you know, I got all the jokes from buddies that I have, like, you know, I have a sugar mama and, you know, do I ask for an allowance and things like that. And, you know, I thought I was fine with it. But then my wife got sick. And I had to switch jobs to find something that made more money. And I remember when I got my job offer, I realized that I was going to be making a little more than she was. And I was so ashamed at how relieved I felt. I mean, I was so relieved. I felt like I was finally a real man because I had a paycheck that I could slap down on the table that was bigger than hers. And I felt bad for how stupid I knew that was. Like I knew it was stupid. And yet I still felt that way because that's how deep these things run.
That's also because, Aaron, somewhere we don't have a dollar value attached to homemaking.
Yeah.
You know, it's a lot of work. Raising kids, taking care of the house, cooking food, cleaning, this is a lot of work. But because we don't have a dollar value attached to it, it is as good as nothing. And that's where you don't feel like you're doing real good work. And that's why maybe a lot of women also want to sort of make sure they make the money, and that's burning them out as well. That's a story for another day. But since today's show is about daddy files and it is about parenthood, why is it so important for fathers to be involved in parenting, Aaron?
I mean, if you want to look at it from if you're someone who likes statistics and research, you can go on Google and find out that involved, parents, fathers who are involved have kids who are less likely to get pregnant and less likely to drop out of school and more likely to succeed in life. There are countless benefits to being an involved dad. And for me, though, it was, I wanted to enjoy my kids, and I wanted to be there for them and to shape them. And that was proving very difficult for me at different points because, like I said, my wife couldn't work any longer. And so I had to really step up on the job front. And for 5 years, I was vice president of a public affairs company. And I just, I recently in March, I quit because, and I didn't have anything lined up, but I had become a bystander in my own life, and I wasn't seeing my kids enough. And, they're not going to remember the paychecks I brought home. They're going to remember whether or not I was there. And so I jumped, and I made a huge jump and kind of a leap of faith. And I was very privileged to do that. But, it's important because your kids are going to benefit, and you're going to benefit from being an involved dad. And, years from now, when your time is up, I really believe that I'm going to be grateful that I, took steps to be with them more and be present with them more.
And we're grateful you've taken up this huge initiative with whatever work you're doing. So, Aaron, you know that I have a petition on change.org, and, a lot of people actually smirked at me and said, oh my God, you didn't have a better idea? Like, why do you want daddies to change diapers? And my thought was, there is a narrative that needs to change, and we need to start from somewhere. This diaper company is huge. The amount of impact it has on the consumers is huge. So here in India, diaper changing is predominantly a woman's job. Okay, so they will know which size to pick up, which brand to pick up, which store to pick it up from, and what's the inventory around it. What's the situation back in the US with diaper changing?
It's largely the same.
Really?
It's very much the same. I'm spoiled because I'm in a bubble with very involved dads, but that is not the norm, and I know that's not the norm. This is a problem that we have tried to tackle. A bunch of dads who are very active on social media and have decent followings. Years ago, there was a diaper company who created a commercial. And they showed a bunch of dads with their babies, and then they called it the ultimate test because, and the implication was that dads were so bad at changing diapers that if these diapers could hold up to the dads, these idiots, then they'd be really great. And, we got that commercial pulled. We got them to work with dads.
Oh, you were the people that got it done, because in my research, I knew that there was a group of people that got it pulled down, and I'm happy to know that some of you did that. So what was the logic? Why did you want that ad pulled down?
Because there's, when you have this stereotype that men are idiots and that they're useless, well, they're only going to rise high enough to meet that low bar. And if we set the bar so low, then we're never going to have progress. And I think what you're doing is important because representation matters. It matters when years ago, when we couldn't see people of color on TV, when we couldn't see gay people on TV, we eventually started to come together a little bit, specifically because people were seeing themselves in these roles. I mean, even look at, Black Panther came out a few years ago, and that was so widely celebrated in the Black community because it was a bunch of starring roles featuring Black people, which are so rare.
Right.
And, so that's the whole thing. Representation matters. If more men see pictures of themselves, people who look like them doing household chores and doing childcare duty, then that's setting the expectation higher. And that is exactly what we need to do. And it's up to, a lot of people say companies and corporations don't have a responsibility to be socially responsible. And I disagree. I think they do. And not only that, I think that too many of them don't realize that they can actually be more financially successful if they embrace some of these, some of the inclusivity and progressiveness. They're going to do well. And that's been proven out by a whole bunch of companies who have featured more, LGBTQ people in their ads and interracial couples. So I hope these companies get smart, and the only way to do that is to put pressure on them like you're doing. So thank you.
You're welcome. And thank you for supporting this cause. Once again, I'd like to reiterate, it's www.change.org/PapaPampers2. So the hashtag is Papa Pampers 2. And actually, Papa does pamper, but we don't get that narrative out. In fact, when I was working on this petition, I did some research and I realized that airports don't have, so the men's washroom at the airports don't have diaper changing tables. So imagine if you were a father walking with your child at the airport, taking a flight, and you need to change a diaper, where would you go? I mean, there's so much that needs to change.
I have friends who have been on that particular mission for a decade now, just trying to get more restaurants and businesses to include diaper changing stations in the men's bathroom, because otherwise we're doing it, on the dirty floors, and we're going out to the car to do it. And it's not fair. If we want, to promote women in the workplace and, equality and egalitarianism among chores, then we need to give people the logistical tools to do that. And so if a dad can't go change his kid's diaper while they're out, then that's just going to keep extending the problem of moms doing everything.
Right. So, Aaron, I want to know more about the book that you have. And there's some really interesting stuff there. Also, I read that you're coming up with a new book, and we shall talk about that later. But tell us about this book and why should we read it? What's in it?
So I wrote this book to be very conversational and very much a quick read because, I used to be a journalist. I know that I have seconds, not minutes, but seconds to get people's attention and keep people's attention.
And in today's time and age with so much data, it's just getting fewer seconds now.
Yep, exactly. So I split the book up into 36 let's call them tips. 36 tips that people can implement really quickly. And I wrote them, in short chapters so that their eyes don't glaze over. But again, it deals with a little bit of everything. It deals with, the gender wage gap, and it deals with talking to your boys about consent when they get to dating age, even before that, talking about, the misogyny in religion and the gun problem that we have in America and how that's tied to anger and a refusal for men to deal with their feelings. So, I really had to, that was my biggest struggle with the book. I wanted to write about all of it, and you can't do that. So I focused on what I thought were the most important lessons. And I want to stress this book was hard for me to write specifically because it is basically a chronicle of all my failures. This is every mistake that I've ever made.
So you've been there, done that, and evolved.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still evolving. I still get stuff wrong. But, this is me pointing out the landmines that I stepped on so that maybe some other people can sidestep them.
So when you spoke about consent, Aaron, one of the things that we largely have a problem in India is rape. And, the psychology of why men rape is all coming from toxic masculinity. I'm not defending a man who does this hideous crime, but the fact is, toxic masculinity is destroying it. And I firmly believe, like you said, that the onus lies on us, how we really bring up our children. But I have a question, Aaron, and this is just, highly for us to debate. I, as a mother, and I'm a single mom, and I'm doing every bit that I can to raise a good man, raise a good son who would become a future father, husband, whatever, later on. But there is so much of stereotype narrative in the society. How do I change that? I mean, it's a dilemma for me, right? So I could be teaching him a lot of things here, but there's an advertisement on TV that he watches. There's a cartoon, that he's exposed to. And there are friends that are talking all sorts of misogynistic things. So how do you balance that, Aaron, in your own family?
It is a constant struggle. And so some of the, first of all, I think you need to over communicate. And it drives I have a 12-year-old, and, no 12-year-old likes to be talked to by their parents all the time, but I am forcing those conversations because he needs to hear it, and he doesn't need to just hear it once. He needs to hear it over and over and over again until his eyes roll back in his head and he's sick of the sight of me. And, it gets really tough, like you said, with technology, with the ads that they're presented. One way that I've been able to feel a little better about things. So my 12-year-old does have a phone, but I use a great app, and it's called Bark, and it monitors his phone, and you can have it so it's set to different settings. So it flags any incoming racist texts or homophobic or misogynistic stuff, any drug use or alcohol. And so I see the really bad stuff that comes in from what his what his friends might be talking about. And what really heartened me, what really gave me some hope, was that one of his friends at some point said, "Oh, don't be gay," and he wrote back, "Gay is not an insult."
Wow.
And so even if he doesn't, let me know that he's listening all the time, I was able to see that he was listening. And there's a lot of debate on this because it's, some people consider that an invasion of privacy. And I understand those arguments, but at the same time, I think toxic masculinity is so pervasive that you need a little help to battle it where it lives. And that's what I do. I take every opportunity to talk to him about consent. And frankly, I read a lot. One of the books I read that actually forced a conversation about porn use in boys was a great book by Peggy Orenstein called Boys and Sex, where she interviews 116 to 22-year-old boys, and she got amazing access to their lives. And all of them reported, unbelievably early porn watching. And so I realized that I thought I had a little time. My son was 11. I was too late. I was too late. I had to start those conversations from behind the eight ball. And the lasting thing that after reading that book that stuck with me was the number of boys who wished that their fathers had talked with them openly and honestly about sex. Right. Because when that doesn't happen, then they turn to the internet, and the internet will fill that void in a horrible, horrible way if parents don't talk to their sons about normal, healthy expectations in relationships.
And this is very surprising, Aaron, because, if this is the situation in the United States of America, I can't even imagine what's really happening to some of the Asian and Middle Eastern countries. No generalization, of course, but if I have to largely talk about the culture that we have here in India, we refrain from even using the word sex. We feel intimidated seeing a couple kissing on the street. That's how the situation is. So it's very hush, hush, hush. So there's a rape happening. There's a hideous crime, and alternatively, we're kind of not okay with someone kissing on the street, and we don't even want to talk to our children about it. So sex education only happens in school because it is mandatory. It has to happen with kids, and that's about it. And what you're saying is so alarming. And while you said you're 12-year-old, I think the youngest kid, how young is your youngest kid?
5.
Yeah, so the 5-year-old is also catching up very soon because these kids are growing up so fast. My 9-year-old sounds, like almost a 14-year-old to me when I talk to him.
I agree. And I agree. That's a problem everywhere. People, when you put your head in the sand, and especially with rape, I think that when you don't want to talk about it, and then even more shame becomes involved, then I think you get into almost blaming the victim sometimes. And that's a real horror show too.
Yeah, so blaming the victim has been, very big problem, right? From a Me Too movement to domestic violence. Like here in India, if you're getting beaten up, well, you did something wrong. Did you measure the salt that you put in the food? Well, if you didn't and you got beaten up, you deserve it. So it's a really sad story. Well, things are changing, I must say. Even here in India, there is change that is happening, but there's a long way to go. I have a very interesting question, while we are towards the end of the show. You deal with so many dads that are involved. You call them involved dads, right? So what is the percentage? And you've been in this space for a while now.
You see, that's a tough one. And, my friends and I in the groups that we're in, like I said, we know that we're in a bubble. So I think we're a little skewed. But I mean, just, if you're looking at just generally across the country, nationally in the U.S., I mean, I think it's disturbingly low amount of dads who are involved, probably, a third. And that's a very rough guess. But I mean, it's still very much, if you're a man and a woman and you have kids, man goes to work, brings home the paycheck, woman cooks the dinners, takes care of the kids. And that's how it is for a very large portion of Americans in this country. And, it's exacerbated immensely by, when we have leaders who brag or have bragged in the past about never changing a diaper, about never walking their kids with a stroller down the street.
Yeah.
That's really unfortunate.
It's kind of celebrating toxic masculinity and misogyny in your face, and what kind of a messaging is going out to society. Right. Absolutely. So tell us more about Daddy Files as we close this podcast. What's that about?
Yeah. Daddy Files, it's a website that I started right before my oldest was born in 2008. It's not really a website I keep up anymore. It's gone from a recounting of what daily life was like with young kids, really, to the intersection of politics and parenting. And so that's been a little bit of a shift over the last 12 years. But I started the blog and I started the social channels because I was mortified by how little there was for dads out there. And I was an expectant dad. I didn't want the textbooks and the scientific explanations of what was going to happen. I wanted to hear from an average Joe who I wanted to hear about how their life was going to change and the challenges that they went through as a new father. And so I didn't see anything really like that out there. So I tried to create something. And, for a long time, it was something I loved. But now my oldest is 12 and the story was mine to tell when he was younger, and now he's getting older. I think the story is more his to tell now, and I don't want to embarrass him. So that's really why the blog stopped, because I don't want to tell his story for him.
So what else do you want to do in this space? How do you want to spread this message of fatherhood?
I just want to use what little platform I have to let people and parents of boys know that, it's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to be emotional, that we can avoid these cliches that harm our kids, because we have to if we want them to stop committing suicide so often when they grow up, and to cut down on the rates of domestic violence. And cut down on rapes, and we can be so much happier if we're less angry and more in touch with ourselves. And we all deserve, man, woman, child, we all deserve to experience the full range of human emotions. And all too often that is restricted in men, and that's really too bad. It's sad, and it's unnecessary, and we can do better.
Absolutely. You also have a book coming up, right, next year?
Yeah, my wife and I are writing a book together that's due out in the summer of 2021, and it's called Men and Miscarriage. And
let me hear that again. You said men and miscarriages?
Men and miscarriage, yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
It's again, it kind of ties into this belief that men aren't allowed to feel, and so I'm going out and I'm interviewing, or my wife and I are interviewing a whole bunch of men, and sometimes women too, about what they felt when they experienced this loss, whether it was infertility or miscarriage or, abortion. We are talking to them about how they felt. And it's a conversation that no one is having. This
exactly, because when you talk about miscarriage, it's only women miscarriages.
Yeah, and I get it.
The terms don't even come together, men and miscarriage. I think you're bringing them together for the first time, I'm assuming.
Well, yeah, pretty much. I mean, this is, it's something I unfortunately have experience with because my wife and I, we have 3 kids, but we lost 5 pregnancies. So it's something that really impacted my mental health. It strained our marriage. And now I've talked to a lot of different fathers across, in a few countries. And it's the same. They didn't know if they were even allowed to feel bad, if they were allowed to grieve. And so they just bottled it all up, and it has really serious repercussions later on. So we're still doing the interviews, but we're going to write that and it'll be out in the summer.
Wow, we look forward to that. That'll be interesting. Do let me know if you need any Indian fathers to be interviewed for this one. I'll be happy to help.
Sure, absolutely.
Right. Thank you, Aaron, for this lovely conversation. It's really nice to know that there are men actually doing this kind of work. So the work that I do with gender stereotypes, usually it's so easy to find women breaking gender stereotypes. But when it comes to men, there are few, and that number needs to grow. And there are men like Aaron that are making that change happen. Aaron, on International Men's Day, what is the message that you have for men?
As dads, show up. Showing up is more than half the battle. Show up, be involved. You're going to make mistakes, but that's okay. You make a mistake, that means you're involved and you're trying. Yeah. So, don't buy into the hype. Don't believe all the cliches that are out there. Ask for help when you need it.
Yeah, and show up. Go ahead.
Yeah. And just remember that toxic masculinity, this is not a vilification of all masculinity. Things like strength is good, but force is not. And, protecting your family is a good thing, but overprotectiveness to the point of absurdity is not. So really, I want people to know that when they hear toxic masculinity and they roll their eyes, we're just talking about the extreme parts of masculinity that are destructive and that are harmful. We are not vilifying all masculinity.
Yeah, absolutely. So daddies, please show up and also change diapers. You will make mistakes, but that's okay. You will learn how to change diapers. So, on this occasion of International Men's Day, I would request all the men, all the fathers there to celebrate fatherhood completely and change diapers. Masculine and feminine are actually energies, right? That human beings have. And they're not really genders, but for me, they are really energies. And if we can have that balance of energies within us as human beings, we'd create a beautiful world. So thank you, Aaron, for joining us once again. It was a great conversation. For the listeners who've heard the episode, if you liked what you heard, please share more about this podcast. Also, please don't forget, I have a petition on change.org. I'm asking a leading diaper company to include the father's image on the diaper packaging. Please go to www.change.org/papapampers2. Well, International Men's Day. Happy International Men's Day to all the men there and all the fathers. Like Aaron said, show up. With that, I'll see you next week with yet another guest only on Beyond Cliché. Take care. Stay safe. Bye-bye. Ta-da. Okay, we're done.
Hi, my name's Aaron Gouveia. I'm a dad of 3 in Massachusetts in the United States, and I had a fantastic time talking with Almas at Beyond Cliché.
Have you ever wondered how successful people do their thing? How do they navigate the challenges they often face? Are you wondering about the future of restaurants, film, education, technology, and everything else in between? Hi, I'm Gauri Devidayal, best known for being one of the brains behind The Table, an award-winning restaurant in Bombay. One thing my life as a restaurateur has given me is the opportunity to meet with some truly inspiring people, most often just by chatting with strangers at the community table. And that's what this podcast is about. It's about learning the new dimensions of business and understanding how different people swim this sea. It's an opportunity for me to pick their brains and ask them all the questions on my mind, whether it's about learning from their past experiences or talking about future trends. Through their journeys, stories, and insights, I hope you too, like me, will come away inspired and energized. So come, join me every Wednesday with your favorite drink, because this round is on me.
Sachin Tendulkar, Virat Kohli, Don Bradman, and now Cyrus Brocha. Okay, probably not in the right company. I mean, Don Badminton is Australian. But it's called Cyrus Says, a wonderful show about everything. Find the show on the IVM Podcast app, ivmpodcast.com, or wherever you listen to podcasts.